All right. Well, I want to officially welcome everybody. My name is Lori Dixon. I am the president of Great Lakes Marketing Research, and it's a pleasure to have you on to share some information about child-resistant package testing. On the phone, we also have John Boja with the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And after I go through some of the basic information, then John will be able to answer questions. Or if you have a burning question as we are going along, feel free to ask because others may need clarification as well. So our agenda is going to be to talk about the testing procedures and some issues related to package preparation, and then we'll do some Q&A. We have some questions from yesterday that we will add, and we will also answer any additional questions you might have. So we'll open the floor up at the end of the call for any questions that you want to ask at the end of the interview or at the end of our discussion. And just a reminder that this is only about child-resistant package testing. Consumer research, human factor testing, and the label comp studies that we do are not going to be included in this presentation. So we're going to focus today just on the Poison Prevention Packaging Act. And that's what you've been hearing mostly about when somebody says that they're going to refer to child-resistant packaging. It is defined under the Poison Prevention Packaging Act. The purpose is to protect children from serious personal injury or serious illness resulting from handling, using, or ingesting hazardous household substances. So there's a couple of key things I always try and remind people when we're talking about the Poison Prevention Packaging Act. First of all, the purpose really is to protect children from serious personal injury or illness. So when you're thinking about whether or not your package should be tested, whether it should be tested in a certain way, whether you think you should retest your packaging, all of those things you should do your own question to yourself. Do I need to do something to be sure that this will protect children from serious harm? You yourselves know best if changes you make to your package or the way you produce and put your substance through the distribution channel, you know if some of those things might compromise the security of your package. So if you're ever in doubt, the best thing to do is have the test done again, because that's the ultimate purpose, is that you're putting safe products in the market. The other issue with this statement is that it is household substances. So if in fact the materials are not designed to be for household use, they are not included in this. And as we discussed yesterday on our call, substances in 5-gallon or larger sizes are not required to be child resistant. So if you have additional questions on what is or is not considered a household substance, we can catch that at the end of the interview. One more slide, just for clarification. We refer to this as the Consumer Product Safety Commission 16 CFR 1700. But you often see that you're asked to do some testing according to the Poison Prevention Packaging Act. So there's two segments of the Act that are most important. 1700.15 is the actual packaging standards, and .20 is the testing procedure. So when you're hiring a company to do the testing, we are doing it according to .20. So sometimes you'll be asked to refer to 16 CFR in a certificate or when you publish your certificate of conformity. So you're going to be using the terms 16 CFR 1700.15 and .20 because those are the key sections. You'll also find on a fairly regular basis that other substances that are regulated will refer to CFR 1700. It's typically the reference is special packaging. In this particular case, is an example for special packaging for liquid nicotine. And you'll see that it refers to many things, but it says that it has to be in the safe containers, packaged in accordance with the standards provided in section 1700.15, so that's the standards, and tested in accordance with the methodology in point 2.0. This notice is generated by the CPSC, so of course all the references are correct. The state of California issued their statements about cannabis safety and refers again to testing has to be in accordance with the Poison Prevention Packaging Act. They refer to 16 CFR 1700.1, but in essence, it is the testing protocols that are described in point 2.0, the section that I referred to. Don't want to get into a lot of detail on this, but I think it's important that you understand how to correctly reference the testing that you have done when you are telling your customers or others within the company the kind of testing that needs to be done. So one more element of confusion that has come up recently is that we will be asked to test according to D347517. Well, in essence, this is actually the standard classification for child-resistant packages that is published and copywritten by the ASTM. So for example, when you give us a child-resistant package, we will use this classification to determine the type of package that it is. It might be, for example, a 1A, which is a push and turn, which is a pretty typical one. Or it might be some kind of a unit dose. And there are multiple different classifications for unit dose packaging. It's important to us and to you that we know the classification of your child-resistant locking mechanism, because that allows us to put that correctly in the report. And then for us, for testing purposes, we would never test a child again on a package with that same ASTM classification. So that's why it's important. It has to be accurate and recorded and known. So special packaging, what are some of the key statements of special packaging? It's packaging that's designed or constructed to be significantly difficult for children under 5 years of age to open or obtain a toxic or harmful amount of substance contained therein within a reasonable time and not difficult for normal adults to use properly. So I want to go through a few of the key phrases in this statement. First of all, when it says packaging, that means the packaging system, the cap, the bottle, the seal, the liner, whatever you have that creates that packaging system is what is tested. A cap on a different bottle, as all of you know, might not perform the same as that same cap on a different bottle. So it's the system that we test. It's designed to be significantly difficult, not impossible. That's why they're called child-resistant packages and not child-proof packages. The children are under the age of 5, so they're 3.5 to 4.25 years of age, and they are to be kept out of a toxic or harmful amount. Now, just to clarify, the toxic or harmful amount is determined by the manufacturer of the substance. We recommend that you have toxicology documentation so that you can say for a blister card or some kind of a unit dose package, this is the amount that's toxic, here's the data to prove it, and you should append it in your report. Because when we produce the report for any kind of unit dose or blister packaging, we refer to the F level, which is the failure level based on toxicity. So it's important, again, for us that we know what that is, and that is the obligation of the company to determine that. We're going to talk about CFR, as I had mentioned, but on our website, if you need to look up other regulations, the 16 CFR, there's a link to it. There's also the ISO standards and the international standards for Canada, et cetera. There's also the lighter regulations. This conversation is not going to be about lighters. They reference and use many of the basic protocols of package and unit dose testing, but it is different. So that would be a different regulation that we would be looking at. And just as background, at the end of this phone call, probably tomorrow, I'm going to post the webinar on our website. It will be exactly as you see here, the audio and the video, and you'll be able to click on a link and you'll see it in blue on the front page of our website where you see the word webinar now. So that could be another reference for you. So a few more people have joined us, which is awesome. If you could mute your phone, that would be super. I don't want to mute everybody because I know John is on the phone and I don't want to mute him. And some of you may have questions along the way. So getting ready for testing. A couple of the things that we always want to remind everybody so we don't have any surprises along the way is that testing does take about 4 to 6 weeks. Yes, we do it faster than that, but we need to be realistic about the amount of time it takes to prepare the package. And sometimes we begin testing and we find something is wrong. It's either a quality control issue or possibly the directions don't communicate well, or you realize that the cap that you thought you sent us, you didn't send us. So little things happen along the way. We keep in touch with you every day, but it's important that you give yourself enough time because it doesn't always go smoothly. The report that you get and that you need has all of the background information and the protocols that were used for that test, the data collection forms, and any consent forms that are signed. The data collection forms are the original documents that come from the field that are signed by the tester. Again, if you need to produce information or give affirmation that testing was done, you're going to need the original data collection forms to do that. And then there's some decisions that have to be made. Package preparation is key. We will talk a little bit later about the placebo, but it's important that you have a placebo for testing reasons. It makes it a much more clean test for even packages, but for any kind of unit dose, you need to have the placebo in there because it does influence how the package withstands the testing. With respect to the torque, you'll need to know what the torque is in which the torque that the consumer will get when they're in the marketplace. So you would probably measure the torque on your online systems or however the packaging is done at your facility. This is another reason why the manufacturer, that is the person, the company that puts the harmful substance in the package that ends up in the marketplace, that's why they are the ones who are responsible for the testing because they know how the package is torqued, they know how the cap is put on, they know how it is delivered to the consumer. Cycling refers to opening and closing the package. The regulation requires that the packaging needs to be child resistant for the lifetime of the package. So if this package has a 250 count, then you can assume that the package might be opened and closed 250 times. So it has to retain its child resistant characteristics for 250 openings and closings. So the cycling of the package occurs prior to the testing, and either we can do that or you can do it, but it has to be documented because it's very important that the characteristics of the package are known when it goes into the marketplace or when it goes into our testing. The other issue with cycling, just if you're a gas can manufacturer, the cycling for gas cans is actually in the regulation and it says 250 times. It has to be opened and closed. The reason for that is because by definition the gas cans are sold empty, but they're supposed to be used for filling and getting gas and taking it home, etc. So the assumption is that it could be opened as many as 250 times. That's just putting things in perspective, that the whole concept of child resistance for the age of the package is very important. So I'm going to move on now to talking about the child panel, the requirements in the protocol. Many of you have done testing, so we won't spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to clarify a few things that might help you as you get ready to do testing or might help you as you're designing your packages. The children are 42 to 51 months of age, and specifically we have to test 30% in the youngest group, 40% in the middle, 30% at the end, etc. The only reason that really matters is it gives us a lot of confidence that the test is robust and the testing results are going to be very consistent because you don't have very much fluctuation in the panel of children. So when we do a panel of 50, we will often say, this panel of 50 is going to be pretty similar to how the next panel of 50 children respond because we control for so many variables. So we're controlling for age, we're controlling for gender. We also are controlling, as I said, for the ASTM type. So children are not exposed to more than one ASTM type of package, one closure system. And in their whole 10 months that they are in the right age, they can only test twice with us, and they are different packages. And then we control for test site and testers. Again, just reducing any potential for location bias or interaction with the tester bias, etc. So they also have to make sure they can go for 10 minutes without a potty break, because once we begin testing, those little kids have to sit there and help us for a full 10 minutes. We do the testing in pairs. And again, I think that makes common sense that the children are more likely to feel comfortable when somebody else is with them. And when we begin the testing, they have a little partner with them. We have a very strict script that we follow. We ask them to try and open the package. They're given 5 minutes to open the package. If they're not successful, we ask them to stop working on it, and we give them a demonstration. The demonstration is just a visual demonstration only. We don't say any words. We just open it the same way as we assume they would see their mom or dad or grandmother open the package in front of them. And then we give them another 5 minutes to open the package, and they're told they can use their teeth if they want to. And then they have a second 5-minute period. So the entire test is 10 minutes. Think about 10 minutes with a pretty rugged little boy. If you're testing prototypes or things that aren't very durable, 10 minutes is a long time for a kid to be able to spin, fold, mutilate, jump on your package. So you need to just be aware of that. At the very end, we give them what's called the grandma lecture, and that's just our chance to say, be careful, we told you that you could do this today, but you can't touch packages like this at home because they could contain things that are harmful. So it's a chance to remind them that this was a very special occurrence, that they were given a package to test. This is my grandma lecture to all of you. The testing that you are doing is to determine if your package is child resistant. Packages are not child proof. I go through the media almost every day, and there are articles in magazines across all the different industries, and it surprises me how many of those magazine articles and industry journals refer to this kind of special packaging as child proof. It is not child proof. And it's frustrating for me because if you tell somebody something is waterproof, like if you had a waterproof watch, you might go swimming with it because you were told it's waterproof. So it gives you a certain level of confidence. These packages are child resistant. They only have to keep out 80% of the kids. They're not child proof. And we as industry members and experts within the industry have to make sure that parents understand that they're given a 10-minute buffer to find their child and take that package away from their child. It's not going to keep out children for much more than 10 minutes and still be acceptable for a senior adult to use. So I will get off my soapbox and I'll get back to talking about the pass-fail criteria. So as I just alluded, it doesn't have to be 100% child resistant. It has to fall within acceptable ranges. So we start with a panel of 50 children. If it passes at 94% in that first 5-minute period, and after 10 minutes, we're passing at 90%, both of those fall in the pass range, and we can end the testing. However, there are times when it falls in that continue range. And if it falls into the continue range for either the first 5 minutes or after 10 minutes, then we can add additional panels to the sample. So we could add 100 or add 50 more kids to have a panel size of 100. And you see that the pass-fail numbers change. And we also have an option to continue. We could add another 50 and get to 150 children. And again, the pass-fail criteria change in the first 5 minutes and after 10 minutes. We could go up to 200, but we have to be realistic. As I said before, the test protocol is very robust. It has stood the test of time. We find great consistency across panels. If you're not doing well, if you're not going to pass at 80%, if the indication is you're not going to make it, it's not logical for you to continue testing. We just know historically that that's probably not going to happen. So your goal is that 80% that you see for a panel of 200. But if you're not heading in that direction, we will probably encourage you to make some modifications to the package. I can share with you that we've been testing literally since the regulation was passed, and most of the packages out there that are tested with these panels of children are passing within 50 children. Maybe some will pass within 100. But the package either works or it doesn't. If you get pretty crazy results, like kids are getting into it, in 3 and 4 seconds or 10 seconds, and other kids aren't getting into it at all, our first response is going to be to check to make sure that there's consistency in those packages. Because oftentimes very strange variances are a function of some kind of quality control issue with the package. So that's always something to check. And we would encourage you to check that if you're seeing weird or inconsistent testing results. So now let's talk about that senior panel. As you've heard all along, packages have to be senior friendly and child resistant. So when we do the testing with the seniors, we also have pretty strict guidelines. The seniors are ages 50 to 70. The panel is 70% female in each age category. We also have the same tester and site requirements. So again, we don't introduce bias into the sample. And seniors are also not allowed to test more than 2 of the same kind of package. If they test 2 packages with us, they have to be different styles. Again, that should make common sense because we don't want them learning from one package to the next. So that's the reason for that. Those ages of 50 to 70, we have requirements within those ages that half of them are the oldest age group, ages 60 to 70, and then the younger group is split so that we have some who are 50 to 54 and some who are 55 to 59. The senior panel testing protocol, again, is highly regulated. We have normal adults sign a consent form. We give them 2 identical packages, and we ask them to open and properly close the 2 identical packages according to the instructions, and we can point out where the instructions are. Typically, they're on the package. They might be on a carton. They might be on a patient information form. After we point that out to them, if they stop prior to this 5-minute period, we can ask if they're finished or if they want to keep trying. And we give them 5 minutes to open that first package. Then we want them to empty some of the placebo into a container. So that's why we make a big deal about having the placebo in vials, because we want something to be in there, typically beans or whatever, so that they can take one out and they can close the package. It helps reinforce the concept that there's something in here. We want you to take the cap off, take something out and then close it so we can time the opening and we can time the closing separately. If it's a unit dose, we need something in because it stabilizes the blister card or the pouch, and it gives us a better opportunity to make sure they're able to access the contents. After they do that, we hand them a new package. It's an identical package. It's brand new. It's got the same brand new torque on it. However, it's new to them. That's why we need 200 packages for the seniors. So we hand them a new package and we repeat the commands, and they're given 60 seconds to open this second package. it makes sense to give them only 60 seconds because they just had 5 minutes to figure it out and open it, and now they're given 60 seconds to repeat the exact same actions. And then they rate the ease of opening of the package. As I said earlier, we have normal adults. We actually have a test for normalcy. If they cannot open that first package, it makes us wonder if they are physically able to open packaging. So we give them a regular package, not a special package, but a regular package, and ask them to open and close regular packaging. The assumption here is if they can open and close regular packaging, they should be able to properly use special packaging. When it comes to calculating the failures for the Senior Adult Use Effectiveness, which is the SAUE, they have to be able to open that first package in 5 minutes. So if they don't, and they pass our normalcy test, that's a failure. Or if they can't open and close the second package in 1 minute. So after we do the calculations, we need to have 90% of the seniors effectively use the package, and that's the Senior Adult Use Effectiveness statistic. Getting into a little bit more detail, and again, I think it's just important that you know how the data are being presented to you when you get your updates, when your packages are in the field. If it's a single dose, they have to open the package in 60 seconds. Since it is a single dose, there is no closing requirement, and we look at the number of successes, the number of adults who are able to open it, over 100, and that percentage is our Senior Adult Use Effectiveness, or the SAUE. If it's a package that can be closed, your typical bottle, or now some of those boxes that you open and close, they open and close the second package in 60 seconds, and that equals a success. But we have to verify that closing. I'm sure you've even seen it yourself or done it yourself. You think you've closed a package and you really haven't. So we have to verify that the package was closed correctly and retains its child-resistant characteristics. But remember, they're only child-resistant. They are not child-proof. So the assumption is that 20% of the kids can get into a package even when it's closed correctly. So we only begin to count child failures in excess of 20%. So I want to provide a little bit more detail. Again, we have that 90% minimum effectiveness, but I want to show you mathematically how we calculate the SAUE for a reclosable package. And the numbers that you get from us will tell you how many seniors opened and closed correctly, and then how many children opened the package. So in a typical scenario, let's say that 0 seniors failed. That means all of them opened and closed the package. But let's say that 20 of the 100 children who were given that package actually open it. When you do the math, remember that the first 20% of the packages opened by the children fall in the acceptable range. So I don't add any additional child failures, and I didn't have any senior failures. So I actually have 100% SAUE. And if the results look like this, it passes the Senior Adult Use Effectiveness test. If we're not so lucky, and we have 10 seniors who didn't open the package, so it's not doing real well with the seniors, and we have those same 20 children open, now it's 20 children out of only 90, because only 90 packages were given to the senior adults, because only 90 of them were closed correctly. So now we have 20% of those packages opened by the children are acceptable, but now it's only 18 that are acceptable. So we have to add 2 child failures. So we have 2 child failures and 10 senior failures, and that gives us an 88% passing rate. So this would actually fall into the fail category. One more example, 3 seniors don't open the package. So now 97 of them are given to the children. If a lot of kids get into them, look at our calculations again, I'm allowed 19.4, which is acceptable, but now I have to add my additional trial failure, and I have to add to that my senior passing rate is only at 89.4%, and again, that would be a failure by the time I add my failures and my senior failures together. So that's how the two numbers come together, how you do at senior level and how it's the package. As I said, package preparation is very important. We want to make sure that it is correct and documented correctly. But just as a reminder that tamper-evident materials have to be removed before the packaging. So tamper-evident materials are not part of the child-resistant mechanism because they're temporary. Remember, my host should be resistant for the life of the package. That you're on torque amount at the packaging line, and we will ask you to document that, because when we produce the report, it will clearly state the torque value that was used to put the caps on. And we assemble them 72 hours prior to testing so that they have a chance to take a set, so that they are more like what would actually happen when the packages go through the distribution channel. And that's the torque, the long-term torque. And then, as we discussed, we have to evaluate the need for cycling so that we make sure that it's opened and closed enough time so a child-resistant package for the life of the product. If you're wondering what your torque should be, so for example, if you're not the manufacturer, but you just create the bottles and the caps, or you're considering testing bottles and caps, the package manufacturers should have some rule of thumb on what a typical torque would be, but it's typically about half the size of the diameter is the torque. So if it's a 24, we usually would torque it at about 12. That's just a rule of thumb, but it's really important that you get that information correct and that it's documented, because we also have some testing that we do with different torque levels in your machinery. There's also some information I want to share about use of the tools. If a tool is available with the package and you sell it within the stores at the retail level, then that tool is given to the children during the test. However, if the tool is pictured but it's not supplied, for example, a lot of the pouches might just have a little scissor icon or something, then the tool is used in the demonstration. The tool is given to the seniors, but the tool is not given to the children. That's just a key piece of this. When we get to the Q&A part, John, I'm going to ask you about the need to test pouches with seniors if it's just a scissor cut. We always have clients who say, my goodness, all seniors know how to use the scissors, so why are we testing to see if seniors can use scissors if that's the tool? So remind me and I will come back and ask you about that. The instructions are also very important. All of the instructions available with the package are given to the respondents, which is the outer box, the inserts, etc., just for the opening feature. The instructions have to be the same as will be in the market. So your same instruction set that you're going to use for your shelf packaging is what we use for testing. It doesn't be on the pack yet if you're still trying to figure it out, but it has the same look and size and color, etc. I wanted to share some background on the instructions. As you are all innovating, really clever in new packaging, we often find that the seniors are not able to look at your directions or your pictures, or they don't interpret your words correctly, and they're not able to open the package just as a function of not being able to understand the directions. So if you're in doubt at all, we strongly encourage you to do a little consumer test beforehand just to make sure the instructions are the best they can be. Because we do not and cannot clarify if somebody is confused by the directions or they ask for help, etc. There's nothing we can do. So it might save you time and money, mostly time, if you make sure that your directions work if it's something new and innovative. The last thing to discuss when you're getting ready for the testing is that a full protocol for a reclosable package means that we need 100 um, are tested, because remember, they get the first one that they get 5 minutes, the second one. So each senior actually gets 2 packages. If we need the supporting child panel, then we need an additional 50 for the children. And remember, if it is a unit dose of some kind, the child is given access to the toxic dose. So if it's 3 sachets that is a toxic dose, then remember, each pair of children gets 1 demonstration, and we need a package, and they would each get 3 units. So that's how we would figure out how many packages we need to get from you. So that is just the background part. I now want to turn it over to either you as listeners to ask questions, or I will go through some questions that we have. But just by way of introduction, there is a Q&A page on the website. So if you need this as a reference, and also, as I said, the webinar will be on our website. But it's a great place to start if you have some general questions about the testing protocols. That's a great place to start. So I am going to present some questions to John to answer, because these are things that have commonly asked that we address on this webinar. So, are there any new substances the CPSC is watching?
I'm not aware of any at the moment, but bear in mind that the CPSC, we monitor our own data sources through the National Electronic Injury Surveillance System, or the NICE system. We get reports from the Poison Control Centers, the AAPCC, and we get, of course, consumers and stuff notifying us of things. But at the moment, I don't see anything on the horizon, or at least I'm not aware of anything on the horizon.
Okay. And any changes to protocols? Are there any relevant protocols being reviewed right now, or elements of the Poison Prevention Act being reviewed?
Not of the Poison Prevention Act. Understand the Gasoline Burn Prevention Act, the testing of the gasoline cans may have some tweaks to it, but as far as the PPPA is concerned, no.
Okay. I can add that the gasoline regulation, the protocol test, was just revised and just published by the ASTM, and it did have some tweaks from the prior one that was published in 2015. So if you are testing gas cans, you might want to get a hold of that newest regulation. Okay. What triggers, you mentioned that you get information, so what triggers action by the CPSC against a company?
We learn of a violation, of course that would trigger action. And we can learn about violations through a whole host of means. Of course, there's under Section 15, there's the self-reporting requirement that if you learn that your product is in violation of our statute, in this case the PPPA, you're to notify staff immediately. We even interpret that to mean 24 hours. We can learn about potential problems, again, from our NICE system or consumer reports, or in some cases we learn about it with other firms filing trade complaints. So there's a whole host of of mechanisms we can follow. The trade complaint can come from a competitor, or it can come from a pharmacy or a retailer. So
if I actually had customers calling into my customer service line saying that the package is breaking when they try and open it or they can't get it to close, then that might trigger me to be obligated to contact you.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the one thing you don't want to do is receive a number of complaints and then spend a year investigating it and then finally figure out, oh yeah, maybe I've got a problem, and then notify us. You should notify us immediately, and if it turns out to be nothing, then we would simply thank you for notifying us, and that would be the end of it.
Okay. So bracketing, we are often asked by our clients, gee, do I have to test every single size? It's the same kind of package. We make 5 or 6 different sizes of it. What is your position on bracketing or testing a sampling of sizes?
If you, for example, made 3 sizes of a package and they use different neck openings, you might test the smallest and the largest and then bracket the one in the middle, the size in the middle. For example, if you made a package with a 28 millimeter neck finish, 33 millimeter neck finish, and a 38 millimeter neck finish, you might test the 28 and the 38. And then on your certificate, since you have to certify each one of these, you would list all 3 sizes, and then in the space where you mark what testing was done, you would indicate which sizes were tested. It might be that you have the same neck finish on all of them, but your bottles are different sizes. One may be longer than the other. And if you felt that that bottle size change might provide an advantage to kids opening it. Let's say, for example, the bottle size was extremely long and you felt that children might be able to use their feet as a vise, you might test the longest one and the shortest one and not worry about those in the middle.
Okay, and then you answered the second part of that, how it should be referenced in your certificate.
Right, right.
Okay. All right, so what data, if any, needs to be sent to the CPSC? Am I obligated after I do a report to send it to you?
No, you're not obligated to send data to us unless we request it. So if a situation arises where we request data from you, of course you're obligated to send it to us. We've had firms elect to send us data after they've generated data simply because if something arose later, they may want to avoid the problem of us contacting you, asking you for data. Certainly when you design a unique package, we would like to see what kind of data that generated. And if you look at 16 CFR 1700.14b, we request that you actually provide a sample of that package to us when a new one goes to market. Of course, we don't want, we want an empty package. We don't want it with the contents in it.
And then what if I send you a report and it is one of these new packages? I don't want my competition to know what I'm up to. Can they get it from you?
Well, we would treat any information you provide to us as confidential business information, and confidential business information does require us to handle that data differently than anything, other data. While it is subject to FOIA, so if one of your competitors wanted to know what happened, it would be treated as confidential business information. and we would need to contact you to get your authorization to release that data. Sometimes if you really want the data from someone else, you can avoid the middleman, i.e. the CPSC, and just approach the owner of the data directly.
Okay, but in essence, if I submit my data to you and I don't give you permission, then it stays just within the CPSC.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, and then we're talking about these test reports. What should be referenced if third-party testing isn't required?
If third-party testing is not required or first-party testing, you really wouldn't be issuing a GCC, because a GCC is only issued for a product that is under a specific rule or ban or regulation. So if you're not required to be in special packaging, then you really wouldn't need to issue a GCC.
But third-party testing for child-resistant packaging isn't required, right?
No, you can do first-party if you wish, if you're set up to do it. One of the things that I didn't catch yesterday, and I had never thought about that, was when you were doing the child test, you said you've got to remember the kids can't go and take a potty break, and I was like, wow, I had never thought about that. It's one of the reasons we see a lot of firms don't do first-party testing, because there's a lot of nuances to testing that you kind of would learn on the fly, and that's probably not the best way to learn it.
That makes sense. Well, yeah. we run into all kinds of crazy things in the nursery schools. So before I move on, somebody's asking if you can perform bracketing for colors if the package has the same neck size, shape, and volume. Would you require, if 3 different colors of the exact same package are on the market and the only difference is color, would I have to test all 3 or just one of them?
You could test one of them. Now, if you believe that there is something unique to the different colors that would impact its ability to meet the performance specifications at 1700.15, then yes, you should test the other colors. Situations where that may arise is if you you needed to add a lot of a given pigment, or you needed to add a carrier for the pigment that would change the properties of the plastics. That would be a concern, and that might impact the performance specifications. So in that case, you may want to test the different colors.
But if I didn't think that I had to do anything, if the colors were just subtly different or the process was the same, would I just pick one of those colors, or would you expect to see testing on all 3 colors?
No. Once again, it's if you can justify it. If you had a report from your packaging engineer or a polymer chemist saying, well, these aren't going to affect the colors, the color won't affect the properties of the plastic or its ability to meet the performance specifications, that would be great. One of the things that you should also bear in mind when you're doing that kind of thing is, would this withstand the scrutiny in a legal setting? Because believe me, what a trial lawyer does to you is going to pale in comparison, or what we can do is going to pale in comparison to what a trial lawyer could do. So if it can withstand, legal scrutiny, then you should be fine.
Okay. With respect to the international standards, does the CPSC accept any of the other standards, EN 862 or 14375, any of those?
Yeah, no, we don't. Actually, on that FAQ page that you posted, that is one of the questions that we do answer. Because the testing is different, notably the way they calculate the number of failures, the command to use your teeth is not there. We do not accept the ISO or the EN standards. We only accept data that's conducted according to 16 CFR 1700.20.
Okay.
Now that doesn't necessarily need to be conducted in the U.S., unlike the lighter standard testing, but it does need to follow our protocol.
Okay, so if a company in another country does it according to 16 CFR 1700.20, that is acceptable.
That's correct.
Okay, that's good. When should a package be retested?
A package should be retested anytime a material change has occurred, or if the product that you're manufacturing you no longer feel is materially represented by the testing you conducted. For example, if you change the material used for the package, so if you switched, say, from glass to plastic or plastic to glass, you probably might want to retest it. We've seen
I walk on the wild side. Really, am I going to search a list?
We've seen changes in performance of packaging when the type of plastic used in the container was changed from one plastic to another.
Hey, Lindsay, you might need to, mute your phone. Thank you. I'm sorry, John.
No, I would say we've even seen changes where one type of plastic was used for the testing, and then in production a different type of plastic was used, and there were vastly different results when that package was retested with the different plastic.
Okay. And just to clarify, I had quickly said something about the 5-gallon rule. What is that? Anything that's over 5 gallons does not need to be in child-resistant packaging?
Anything over 5 gallons is not really considered a size a consumer would use. So if you look at 1701, I believe it is, they say that packages of 5 gallons or more are not subject to the Poison Prevention Packaging Act.
Okay, so if it's 5 gallons and it potentially could be purchased at home because it's for pools or something where people might buy it in 5 gallons, in that case, do I have to, or does it still fall into the 5 gallon is okay?
No, it'd be 5 gallons and you wouldn't do it.
Okay.
But bear in mind that when we're talking, well, since you mentioned pool chemicals, if we were talking about something like pool chlorine or whatever, we're into EPA's realm now, and EPA's rules might be different than ours.
Okay, so I want to clarify. If it is a substance regulated by the CPSC and it's in a container that's 5 gallons or more, it does not need to be in a child-resistant package.
Correct. It's not subject to the PPPA.
Okay, perfect. Let's talk about retesting. Who should do the testing? Who's responsible for having that test report or doing the testing?
We consider the manufacturer to be the person or entity that introduces the regulated hazardous substance into the package as the manufacturer. So they are the ones responsible to ensure that that package meets the performance specifications of 1700.15, and they're responsible for issuing the certificate to do that. We've been rather flexible with firms that use, say, a contract packager, and we've allowed either the parent firm or the contract packager to issue the certificate or to ensure that the testing has been conducted. But we would like to know just what business relationship is there. So if you're using, say, Bob's Bottling to do your packaging. We'd like to know who the parent firm is, because Bob may not the distribution of the product, whereas the parent firm would.
Okay. And just further clarification, someone's asking again about when you said a material change would trigger a retest. What if it's like HDPE to another type of HDPE?
Again, that's going to be your discretion and your packaging engineer. I'm not a polymer chemist, so I really wouldn't know if one type of HDPE is different from another. In that example I gave where I said that they went from one plastic to another, that change actually was from HDPE plastic to LDPE plastic. So we're just talking about going from high density polyethylene to low density polyethylene, giving a vast difference in the performance of the package.
So again, if I'm going from a type of plastic to a similar type of plastic and I have data to show that it shouldn't impact anything, then I'm okay. But if I have any reason to believe it does impact the characteristics of the package or how it will perform, then I should test.
Sure. Yes. And that can include if you haven't changed the plastics, but something in the process changed. Let's say that in your molding machines, you experienced a pressure drop, or one of the molds became worn or deformed, and you started noticing perhaps some quality control issues. That would be a material change difference that you would want to follow up on.
Okay. I want to ask this because I don't want to run out of time, and this is a really good question. When it's a resecuring package and you do your 100 seniors and then you give the package to the children and you pass that, do you still need to do the Virgin 50 kid test?
The Virgin test, the child test, is actually with an unopened package. And with the senior test, you may or may not get a full number. We've debated this back and forth if it's really required or not. And I still think that's a matter of debate. I'm going to kind of defer on that one, Lori, and that we might better handle that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. So in the worst case scenario, since there's no, quote, way to avoid it because it's in the PPPA, then you should do it. But if you have data to suggest that the package is working wonderfully, that's up to the manufacturer?
You might want to consult with us first.
Okay. That's a good, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
All right. What should be tested? The cap, the bottles? There are companies that make only caps. There are companies that make only bottles. What's the expectation of what's tested?
Well, when we say that the package must meet the performance specifications, we're talking about the entire package. So if you're buying a closure cap from company A and the bottle from company B, you probably would want to retest that because you don't have any data suggesting that combination passes. If, on the other hand, the bottle that they tested is extremely similar to what you're going to be using, it's the same plastic, it's same neck finish, it's dimensionally identical, and you feel that there shouldn't be any reason that the performance of the tested package is different than the one you have, then you may not need to retest it. But if there is something that gives you pause, then you probably want to retest it.
Okay. Do you need to retest if the opening directions change, but the materials are all the same?
It would depend on what change you made to the opening directions. If the opening directions were in text, and then you decided, well, you know, maybe it's better if I use a pictorial diagram. The burning question is, well, now will children seeing that picture, will that impact their ability to open your package? So that would be something that you would want to consider in that case.
Okay. Let's see. What was another question that came up? Small dimensional changes. I have a feeling you will say the same thing, but you can address that.
Yep.
Okay. The CPSC guidance on cycling, we talked about this briefly. The question is always, what about blister cards when there's one missing? I mean, you don't really cycle the blister cards. It's the life of the product, but a unit could be taken off that card.
Right.
What's the expectation of the CPSC on that?
Well, generally when we test anything, we test the intact package. So if a blister card's been opened, it's no longer intact. So we wouldn't test something like that.
Okay. So the expectation of industry is that you're always testing a new card, a new 8-count or a new whatever.
Correct.
Okay. Do I have to certify empty vials and caps?
Certification is, well, under the PPPA, what we regulate are packages that contain a regulated hazardous substance. So if you didn't test, there would be no reason to test an empty bottle or cap under the PPPA, because you certainly couldn't certify it because you're not certifying it to anything because there's no regulated substance in it.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you didn't test it, I don't think that your ability to compete in the marketplace would be as great as that of something that's already been tested.
So it's more of a sales tool than something that requires a certificate.
No, we would require that the certification, that it be tested somehow, and the responsibility to make sure the testing was done would be on what we would consider the manufacturer of that product. They can rely on the manufacturer of the bottles or the package, their data. Again, that's in that FAQ section. Mm-hmm. That a manufacturer can rely on the bottle producer, the cap producer's data, but the cap producer would not be responsible for ensuring that the final product met the performance specifications.
Okay. Clinical trial drugs that go directly to the physician, do they need certification?
Clinical trial drugs are a little difficult sometimes because a clinical trial drug could be, you could conduct your clinical trials within a hospital, in which case you're not in a household, therefore you don't need to have things certified meet the PPPA, because the PPA only regulates substances used in or about a household. If the clinical trial, on the other hand, was conducted and patients would be taking their medications home with them, then yes, you would need to certify that, and they would need to, again, the proper testing and certification. If another scenario that comes up also when we talk about drugs and going directly to physician, and that's physician samples. In physician samples, the physician that's dispensing the drug to you not only is acting as the dispensing agent, but they're also the prescriber of the medications. And Section 4 of the PPPA allows a prescribing physician to prescribe either medications in complying package or in non-complying packaging. So when they give you a non-complying sample, that they are making that decision to go ahead and give you something that's not in special packaging.
Okay. And this was one of the elements that was confusing. So we started off by saying the PPPA regulates household substances. If it's available online, even though in theory you're assuming it's a wholesale item, not a retail item, but if it's available online, does that automatically make it a household item?
If it's available to consumers, it's a household item. Simply putting the word professional on it or whatever doesn't make it so. You can walk into a number of big box stores and you can see something and say, hey, professional use, or this is what the pros use, or something like that. It's still a household substance. If, on the other hand, the website was secure in a way that normal consumers couldn't order a product, you may need to sign in with a password, or you need to pre-register. That would make it so that your average consumer could not purchase it online.
Okay. But if you have reason to believe that it could be in a household, it's considered a household substance. If it's regulated, then it needs to be in special packaging. That's
correct. Now, if you have reason to believe that if a manufacturer and you're selling it only to professional use only people, and one of your customers then goes and puts it online, you may want to have a word with them saying, hey, look, I'm supplying this in non-compliant packaging because it's for professional use only, and your diversion is now putting my company at risk, but more importantly, you're putting children at risk. So I ask you to refrain from doing that.
Okay. There was also a lot of conversation that is it logical to test seniors if they're not the intended audience? There are plenty of products out there that you'd think, come on, seniors are never going to have this or have access to it.
Well, the senior test is actually a surrogate for the entire population for those that may not have the dexterity of 18-year-old or the normal dexterity of an 18-year-old. And you also have to remember that seniors may not be the actual user of the drugs, but they may be the caregiver that has to dispense that medication or that product. So senior testing is there for a reason, even when they may not be the direct user of the product.
Okay. So now this brings me back to the question about if I have a pouch and it's your basic pouch and it's a scissor icon, do I really need a senior test to prove the seniors can use scissors?
Well, yes, actually, because you and I think of a pouch as just being a couple layers of foil and that's that. But if there's something in that pouch to stiffen it, say some cardboard or something else that may be difficult for a senior to open even with a pair of scissors, that's something that you should know about. So there's a lot of scenarios that on the surface, yeah, that's crazy, but when you start looking at all the various possibilities that might occur, it makes sense to go ahead and do the senior test.
Okay. We talked about this last time, the rationale for using your teeth. Is that ever going to be evaluated? We're always asked that by our clients. Why are you telling them to use their teeth?
Well, in many cases, in some cases, the teeth can actually act like a pair of vice grips and aid the child in opening the package. The use of teeth in some cases could deform the package and allow a child access. So I don't see that changing in the near future, but again, if you have some doubts, you can always contact us, and we could, see if in your case that made a difference or not.
So when you say, there's been a couple of times where you've said, it would be best to on a case-by-case basis. So if I, quote, want to contact you, I'm going to give your contact information at the end. Do I send you a package and ask for a conference call? Do I shoot you an email and say, hey, can we have a conversation? How does one get clarification?
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. You can either call me directly and say, look, I've got this unique package. I'd like you to, your opinion, or I'd like CPSC staff's opinion on it, because my GS level's not way up there. So, that would be something that it would involve us when we're talking about changing, diverting from the regulations. We generally have to get the Office of the General Counsel in on it as well. But an email, I'd like to talk to you, or I'd like to discuss this situation, that's fine. It's sometimes difficult for us to make a decision on something on the fly, especially if you don't provide a photograph at least of the item. So, yeah, an initial contact is great. We can go from there.
Okay. Here's just a question, not related to teeth, but I want to make sure we get it in. Any best practice advice for companies looking to demonstrate the effectiveness, the child-resistant effectiveness is not changed following a minor modification?
Well, one way you could do it is to run a small panel of children if you just wanted to assure yourself that change hasn't made a difference. Run, say, 10, 20 children, and if the performance hasn't degraded any, then that's one way you can assure yourself.
Are there any bench tests or, lab testing or something that wouldn't require panel testing that you've seen that you feel is a good proxy to show no change occurred?
Well, the performance specification is just that. It's a performance specification. So it depends on the package, actually. Some packages rely on certain aspects, some intuition, if you would, to open them. So a change there might be different than if we were talking about a different type of opening. So okay. It's going to kind of be package specific.
Oh, that makes sense. There's a lot of other companies or other industries that are referencing 16 CFR. Do you provide any guidance to other industries if they just reference the guidance but they're not federally regulated?
I think you brought up one of them earlier. When we're talking about cannabis, which a number of state governments have referenced 16 CFR 1700, you've got to bear in mind that that's been legalized in that state and that state only. It's still illegal as far as federal government's concerned, and I really can't talk to you about your specific situation. I can speak in generalities with you about the Poison Prevention Packaging Act. We can talk about if you were packaging, say, a regulated substance like aspirin, but as far as interpreting what your state government meant or just exactly how they want you to implement it, that I can't address.
Okay. And then the last catch-all question, how should an industry interpret the statement, reasonable testing program?
That is what a reasonable person would do. So if you would have a program in place that, let's say you had a decent quality control program where things, as they came off the line, you double check to make sure that you didn't have a problem with your mold or with the assembly process. That would be a reasonable testing program. Something to ensure that the product you put on the market is identical to what, or as close to identical as to what was actually tested.
Okay. Let's see. ASTM applies to remove the test specification for reverse racket. I'm going to read this question because I don't understand it. ASTM within the last year removed the test specification for reverse ratchet. Any insight as to why?
I don't work for ASTM, so you would have to contact ASTM. In fact, under our statute, we're forbidden from specifying packaging design or types. We can require special packaging, but we can't talk about specific types of packaging. So I really don't know, and you would have to contact ASTM.
Okay. So many times we talk about this the General Certificate of Conformity. I don't expect you, people that are on the call, to read this or memorize it, but I just want you to know that if you do go on our website, you can see an example of a GCC. That's the way that they are to be filled out, and this is pulled right from the CPSC website. But even though we keep calling it a certification or a certificate, it is not like a pretty bound certificate with a border and etc. This is the document. It's more of like a document that the manufacturer publishes either on their website or makes available in some other fashion. But this is what the content is. Did you have any comment on the content?
The only comment I would have, well, I have a few comments. First off, as you mentioned, this is something that you, as a manufacturer, issue. The CPSC does not issue these. We don't approve them. We don't do anything like that. So this is a self-certification that you, as a manufacturer, would do. Under identification of the product, not so much for PPPA-regulated substances, but we require these for other things and toys and such. One firm put down everything we make. That would not be acceptable. You need to put down specifically what product you are certifying or what products you're certifying. The contact information, that has to be a specific person at your firm. That can't be just your corporate address and corporate phone number. It has to be an individual, as it states.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about it.
All right. As I said, there's John's contact information. So if you have questions, phone number and email, and then if that doesn't work for you, you can always contact me. So thank you, John. Thank you very much. It's always helpful to get direct from the CPSC where things are standing. So I appreciate you being on the call, and thank the rest of you for joining in. If you have any additional questions you want to ask offline, you can certainly email me, and we wish you all a very pleasant rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
John, again, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.